Today we're going to analyze Nike, and one of the biggest reasons is because of Bill Ackman. He just purchased $275 million worth of shares. This is about 10% of his portfolio. This position wasn't built over time. He literally built this position in less than a month. And it all started when the CEO of the company changed. But Bill Ackman does have a tendency to be a short-term investor where he comes in a position, keeps it for 2-3 years, and then moves on. But we're going to see this company from a long-term investor's point of view and see, is this company worth hanging on until 2030, or is this something that we should skip as long-term investors? And before I get started, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're interested in supporting me more, please consider checking out my Patreon. If you take a look at Nike's revenue, it's about $50 billion, give or take a few hundred million. That is a decline of 2.8% from last year. Nike was making about $40 billion 5 years ago to making $51.5 billion at its peak. As of late, it had a decline of over $2 billion. So one thing to note is that Nike had a constant upstream of revenue. It had a slight period where its revenue plateaued, and in the last 2 quarters, it had a decline. What I really liked about this is that Nike quickly changed course and now is going back to its old strategy that was working, that was constantly contributing to its revenue growth. But you have to understand one thing about Nike. Nike is no longer a fast-growing company anymore. Its growth now is in the single digits. Everybody that wanted Nike products and services, they got them during the pandemic. Now it's those people that need replenishments or are looking for something unique and new. And this really reflects it. It went from growing about 20% a year to growing in the single digits. 2, 3, 5, and in the last 2 quarters, obviously, we had a decline. And analyst projections are very close to historical data that's being shown. Most analysts think that Nike is going to grow between 3 and 5%, and a lot of the sentiment is the same on multiple sites. They're only projecting a 3 to 5% growth. Next, we're going to take a look at Nike's number of outstanding shares. Now, they have been extremely aggressive on share buybacks. They've been buying about 2.5 to 3% of the company ever since the stock started to decline. So they didn't shrink the number of buybacks, but increased them, which makes me very happy. So based off of these projections, I think Nike can decrease its share count by 10% in the next 5 years. Now, as you can guess, Nike has been losing money left and right. It actually only recorded 0.125% in profitability in the last 12 months. Now, this is obviously going to change. If you take a look at down here, Nike is a business that can easily get 10 to 15% profit margin. But as of late, it has been shrinking and even declining for the last quarter. This is mainly due to the fact that they shifted their strategy to pure online sales, and that has been hurting them. They're starting to re-establish relationships with vendors that sell shoes in stores and trying to increase revenue and profitability. Even though we are basically at 0 today, I see this number coming back to 10% in the future. If you take a look at Nike's latest earnings report, then you get a sense of why the stock has plummeted so much. Nike's direct revenue was $5 billion, which is down 13%. Nike's wholesale revenue, which was $3.9 billion, is down by 3%, and Nike's gross profit margin decreased from 100 basis to 43.6 basis. But if you take a look at Nike's marketing on their page, they say they are a growth company. I don't believe they're a growth company anymore. They're a slow, mature company. So that's kind of a little bit misleading information there. So now that we have all the information that we need, let's go ahead and plug these numbers into the Excel sheet and see what we get as a share price in the next 5 years. So for PE, I went with 32. The reason I went with 32, historically, it's been selling at 32 because of its position in the market. I don't see a scenario if it can't get back to its fundamentals that it won't start trading at 32 again. So I'm putting down 32 for the next 5 years. For a PE. Historically, its profit margin has been above 10%. But again, it's a big company, mature company. I think 10% is actually being conservative, not even being bullish. I know you might guys think that's conservative, but this company used to have a profit margin of 20 to 30%. We're saying 10%. This is actually being conservative. After plugging all these numbers, we get a stock price for the next 5 years at $137. If we want to double our return from the S&P 500, we have to buy this stock at $68.67. Another thing I really want to point out that its market cap is very reasonable. In 5 years, it'll have a market cap of $185 billion, that it currently has a revenue of $50 billion, and in the future, its revenue could be close to $60 billion. I think is very reasonable. In my personal opinion, this company is going to hit a revenue of 80 billion, not 60. I think this stock can very easily hit 150 or even 160. Now, in my opinion, this is a risk-free investment. So if you invest in this company versus the S&P 500, I think you have a better chance of getting a above 50% return versus the S&P 500. You also have to understand, in the S&P right now, we are at an all-time high. Usually the S&P sells for about 21 to 22 PE. It's currently at 27. So any moment this thing can crash and consolidate. Whereas Nike is selling for 24 for a company that has solid revenue and a very minuscule decline. And it's going to reestablish all of its businesses, all of its partners, and it's going to re-accelerate everything. So this metrics that these analysts are putting out there, I think they're a bit bearish, and I think 80 billion, the stock price can very easily reach 150 to 160. Anyways, guys, I want to know what you guys think. Do you guys agree with the analysts? Do you guys agree with me? Are you guys bullish? Are you guys bearish on Nike?